Dear viewers, hopefully all of you are doing very well. Today we'll talk about the microfinance, and I'm Dr. Sharat Khandaka who will give this lecture. The lecture outline for today is what is microfinance, how does microfinance work, who are the clients of the microfinance, evaluation of microfinance, benefits of microfinance, and how the microfinance is helping to poverty reduction, and some recent issues with microfinance. So the first topic is what is microfinance. Before going to this topic, let's look at this picture. In this picture shows that the top 1% grabbed about 82% of the wealth of the whole world that has been created in 2017. So only 1% of the people who grabbed 82% of the wealth of the whole world, they are the top richest people, and the remaining 99% of the people, they could only grab only 18% of the wealth created in the world. So how it is related to the microfinance? Because the world is not equally distributed, the wealth of the world is not equally distributed, and it's not helping to reduce the poverty in every country. So that's why the microfinance is absolutely important. In this chart, it shows that only 100 million people in the world, their salary is more than $20,000 per year. And if you look, the bottom of the chart is showing that about 1.7 billion people in the world, their salary is between $1,500 to $20,000. These types of people, they can go to the commercial bank, they can go to the credit union, and they can go to the other financial institution in order to borrow money. But if you go down, where it shows here it's a near poor or the upper poor people, the population is more than 4 billion people in the world, and their income is around from $360 per year till $1,500. These 4 billion people, they do not have any financial institution they can go to borrow the money. So what these people can do, this large number of people, which is more than 4 billion people in the world, according to the World Bank, that they have only one solution in order to go and borrow money, and that is basically the microfinance. So microfinance is the provision of financial services for the poor. Nowadays, in the Western banking society, what we can see that the people go and borrow money from the banks, and the bank can give them the money only if they have sufficient wealth. So bank can only provide the services to those people who have sufficient collateral, they have sufficient saving, or they do have sufficient income. However, the microfinance, it is not designed to help the rich people who are already in a good financial situation, but it is for the poor people. So the services provided by the microfinance includes savings, transfers, insurance, and the credit card services or the credit services. The third is the microfinance products are tailored to the demographic, financial relationship, and needs for the poor. So we are talking about those poor people who need support for their financial independence, who need financial support for to be an entrepreneur. So the microfinance can be defined as which is provide financial services to poor through institutional system delivered by many types of institutions, which includes commercial bank, state development banks, postal banks, MFI banks, NBFI, which is non-banking financial institutions, cooperative societies and credit unions, rural bank, and NGOs. The World Bank defined microfinance as the financial services provision to the low-income client, including consumers and self-employed. And these clients are usually borrowers who are considered unbankable by the conventional financial services. As I mentioned earlier, that the traditional banking system allows its client to borrow money only if they have sufficient collateral, if they have sufficient income or savings, whereas the microfinance can provide loan to those clients who are unbankable, who doesn't have savings, and who generally need few amount of money in order to be the self-independence. And these are very poor people of the society. Though they may well be people experiencing financial services, in many cases the repayment rate of the microfinance loan is about 97%, which is much higher than the conventional banking system. So how does it work? Let's look into the chart. In this chart, at the top of the chart, it shows how to break the cycle of the poor. So we know when there is a poverty, when people are poor, they formally do not have that much of education because they start working at very early age because they need money. So the poverty pushes the people to not to have any formal education. And from no formal education, they quite often they are ill health, there are illness in the developing countries. They're not very knowledgeable about the health of the people, so they normally have the poor health, and because they have poverty, they do not have that much of education, and their physical condition is not very well. So illness is a big disease for them. It's quite often for them to be the vulnerable people in the society. So microfinance is breaking this cycle. So how microfinance can break this cycle? So the microcredit loan, which is a product of the microfinance, is helping these poor people to get the self-employment. It gives them money in order to start their own business, in order to be self-independent. So the small microcredit finance helps them for the cash flow for themselves. It also helps them for the micro savings, and also it can help them to get some micro insurance for them. So it helps them to be the financial independent, better health, protection against the illness and the crisis, and better education. And when these types of things they can actually get, these poor people, that they have the cash flow because they're self-independent, because they receive loan and they receive training from the microfinance institution. So because of this training, because of this loan, they become self-independent. They're receiving cash flow from their own uh, entrepreneurial activities. So it helps them to escape from the society. And this is how the microfinance work. In this slide, we'll talk about the evaluation of microfinance. The history of microfinance can be tracked back as far as 18th century, when the theorist L. Spooner wrote about the benefits of small credit to the entrepreneurs and farmers as a way of getting out of the poverty. Nevertheless, informal savings and the credit group have operated for centuries across the developed and developing world. During 1800 centuries, the Irish Loan Fund, or in short ILF, system initiated. ILF provides small loan to poor farmers without the collaterals. It covered 20% of total Irish household. Further, in 1900th century, formal savings and the credit institution emerged in Germany, and then it spread across the Europe. However, the modern use of the expression of the microfinancing has root in the 1970s, when an organization called the Grameen Bank of Bangladesh with the microfinance pioneer Dr. Muhammad Yunus were started and shaping the modern industry of microfinancing. So why it is so important? And what are the main difference of the microfinancial institution and the conventional banks? And these are the few differences. Number one is the loan size. The microfinance, the loan size is quite small. It's between $100 and $500, and the average loan size is about $100. Second is the consumers of the microfinance, or the customers of the microfinance, are relatively very poor people, and particularly of women. In one survey, it shows that around 95% of the customers of the Grameen Bank is women, and mostly for the microfinance institution, the customers are women, and about 90% of the customers are women. Third, the income activities. So the microfinancial institution, it helps, or they help the poor people to be self-employed, and it's through the informal sector. And the loan of the microfinance is not having any collateral, whereas it's not the condition of the conventional banking system. And they must have a savings account which is linked to the microcredit loan, what they're receiving from the microfinancial institution. So the features of the microfinance includes the microfinance leaders inspired social and economical revolution in the emerging market, organizing the poor under the banner of microfinance organization. So it's help the poor people, or who are the most disadvantaged people in the society, in order to be financially independent. NGOs, which is the non-government organization, they also approach to the poverty alleviation, and they also help poor people to be self-independent, and sometimes they can also provide the microcredit loan to their client. Physical collateral free, but the social collateral based lending is one of the main things of the microfinance. They do not have physical collateral for the loan, but it is a social based lending system. It's a group based lending system. So there is a social collateral, small loans under and small amount of savings. So the microfinance institution, they provide small loan, got over $100 to $500, and it helps poor people to generate small saving. And another features of the microfinance institution is it provide group or individual based lending. So people is generally, another feature of the microfinance is a group or individual based lending or the savings, because the microfinance provide group based and as well as the individual based lending or the loan to its client. So there are social collateral, there are group collateral, which is peer group monitoring system. And another main features of the microfinance institution is they are not for the profit. So the motivation is not profit generation. So why microfinance is important? As we discussed earlier, there are 4 billion poor people across the globe, and they need access to financial services. And the social justice is also very important for these poor people. Only the philanthropy is not enough. Third, women suffer the most in the developing world because they do not have good education, they do not have financial independence in the developing countries. So microfinance helps the woman in order to be self-independent. Fourth, the development of the informal sector, such as the farmers and the tailors. So the development of the informal sector is quite important for an emerging countries, and it also helps the emerging countries to reduce the poverty. So by doing all of this, the microfinance increase demand. So there is strong demand for the microfinance product, which is approximately $50 billion per year for the microfinance product and loan. and the growth rate of the microfinance industry is about 15 to 30% annually. And nowadays we talk about the social corporate responsibility. So the microfinance we also talk about the moral responsibility of doing the business and how to do the right thing. So how does it work? So there are a few examples in this slide about the microfinance. Number one is the microfinance lends small amount to clients that traditional financial institution would not deem creditworthy. As noted, the most common microfinance product is a microfinance loan. Second, the loan are secured against the honor of a peer group of the client, so which is the social collateral, instead of using the personal collateral. If one client failed to make payments, others in the lending circle will be denied future credit. And third, thus the peer group takes a joint liability and act as the control group of to ensure loan payment. Peer pressure encourage borrower to be selective about the group members and to repay loan completely and on time. High repayment rates are thus common here. Because the microfinance industry, they need additional collection time and resources. Sometimes the interest rate for the microfinance product could be higher, and this is a group-based lending system. So there will be peer group who jointly receive the loan, and each member will look another member in order for the repayment structure. And also, if one member in the peer group fail, other member will be jointly responsible. So they do not want this thing to be happen. So they want to make sure the entire group will be successful in order to be successful within the microfinance industry and within the society. So it works very well, and there are some evidence that suggests that the loan repayment rate and the succession rate of the microfinance loans are about 97%. So 97% people of the microfinance industry, they repaid the loan on time, whereas in the traditional banking, this is quite different story. So in this chart, it shows the number of the poorest family in different continents and the microfinance industry's outreach. So for example, if you look at this one, it shows in Asia there are about 123 million poor people, 123 million poor families in Asia, and about 96.51 million people actually they receive some help from the microfinance, which is the coverage of 78.5%. The next one is about the Africa and the Middle East. There are about 60.4 million poor families in Africa, and microfinance product services to 7.52 million people, which is about 12.7% coverage. Third, Latin America and Caribbeans. There are about 9.4 million poor families in Latin America and Caribbean, and 2.21 million people received some services from the microfinance or loan from the microfinance, which is about 23.8% coverage. And in Eastern Europe and Central America, there are about 0.8 million poor families, and microfinance could reach about 29.2% of them. So, what in the modern society, what are the contributions of the microfinance? So, number one is the microfinance supports poverty alleviation effort. It also helps expand income and employment. Second, the microfinance empowers women and other socially excluded groups. Number three, poor people use microfinance for smoothing consumption. It also helps people to become financially independent. Four, deal with emergencies such as sickness, natural hazards. Five, contribution towards education, health, funeral, wedding. And sixth, combat HIV and AIDS, malaria, and other diseases in developing and emerging countries. So currently the microfinance is a maturing industry. There are about 150 million clients across the globe of the microfinance industries, and there are about 80 million borrowers. Additionally, there are about 7,000 to 12,000 microfinance institutions across the globe, and some of the microfinance institutions they can be transformed into a bank. A good example for this could be the Grameen Bank, which was initially a microfinance institution and it emerged as a bank in Bangladesh. There are other banks they also provide microfinance product, and mobile network is used for the microfinance industry across the globe. However, there are some debate about microfinance. Number one is about the sustainability. It is suggested that the higher interest is okay to cover the administrative cost and be profitable and to attract more people to open up more microfinance ventures, but sometimes there are debate that the microfinance institution they can provide very high interest rate. So there is a debate that whether the microfinance institution they are charging too much interest rate for this client or not. However, because there are increased competition and increased innovative product in the microfinance industry, so there are some cost involvement. And to serve about 3 to 4 billion people in the world, it's a very big thing. There are sustainability issues. There are issues that the microfinance industry can have a huge growth. It helps to reduce the poverty. However, there are often a strong debate about that the high interest rate in microfinance is not okay because it can exploit the poor people. And there is also a debate that the high profit motives of some institution it will attract some other microfinance industries investors to invest in this society or invest in this business. So the motive of helping the poor people will shift towards the profit orientation. So that could be a bad thing for the microfinance industry. So what are the current issues of microfinance industry? Number one, there are several studies found that the microfinance charges very high interest rate, as I mentioned earlier. The microfinance institutions trade on the vulnerability of the poor, and sometimes for them it could be a big business because of the poverty, so they can use the poverty to create more money. However, there are some response to these controversies, and what are these responses? Which is that what matter most to the poor and the undeserved segment is access to the financial services rather than the interest cost, because most of the poor people of the society, or most of the vulnerable people in this society, which is about 4 billion people, for them is the most important thing is to access to the financial system, to access to the financial services that requires them in order to be self-independent. Second, the microfinance client or the entrepreneurs or the small business owners or the borrowers will take a microfinance loan. The repayment period should match with their cash flows that they hope to generate in their business, and the interest rate in the microfinance industry should be reasonable to their clients as well, because there are some controversies about the interest rate. So the microfinance industry should make sure that the interest rate what they're charging should be reasonable for the client. The repayment should match with the cash flow what the clients generate from the business, and the access to the financial services to the poor people should be sufficient for all these poor people. So why one institution should invest in the microfinance? One is there is a large market. This is a very large market globally. Second is the unfulfilled demand, because the return of investment on the microfinancial product, the microfinance institution is quite high compared to the traditional bank, and also the default rate is quite low. Three is success or failure is not linked to the world political event, because it's not linked to the rich people. So success or the failure of the financial institution is not linked to the world political events. Specifically for the microfinance institution, it's an appealing industry. Fifth is it helping poor directly and avoid corrupt government. And there is always something about that. If you do good, then it will help you to feel good. And investors may lie the reasons to invest in the microfinance, because they want to invest in microfinance because they want to help the poor. So these are the reasons of investing in the microfinance. The next slide is it's a picture of the pioneer of the microfinance, who is Professor Dr. Yunus, who received the Nobel Peace Prize because of his microfinance institution, which is the Grameen Bank, which also won Nobel Peace Prize. And in this slide, it shows top 50 microfinance institutions across the globe. So the number one is ASA, or it's called the ASHA, which is located in Bangladesh. The second is the Bandhan, which is located in India, and so on. So if you look into this top microfinance institution, and if you look into the location, you'll find that the microfinance industry is a big industry, and it's across the globe, and it is in the emerging nations. So despite of several criticism in the microfinance industry, microfinance is needed by various segments of the society and the poor people, because they need some help from the financial institution in order to be self-independent and self-motivated and self-sufficient. And the lenders who are engaged in the agriculture work on a seasonal basis, and the manual laborers in the forestry or the mining or several other industries, they require credit for their consumptions they need, and also they require a small loan in order to make sure that they can start their own business. Small and the marginal farmers, they require credit for the working capital requirement as well. So that's why the microfinance industry probably could be the only institution which can serve these poor people, whose income is between $365 a year till $2,500. So these vulnerable people, these poor people, which is about 4 billion people in the world, they do not have any other institution to go. So the microfinance institution, they can provide the services. So in spite of the criticism, there are so many important aspects of the microfinance industries. And the next slide, there are some links in the YouTube videos. So if you click some of this link, you will find some interesting video, and I would highly recommend you to watch this video to know more about the microfinance. Thank you very much for watching my YouTube video, and if you like this video, do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.